Well, we're really pleased to be joined on the OHL podcast this week by a guy that had a cup of coffee, you might say, in Kitchener with the Rangers. And then with one of the Rangers' favorite trading partners back in the day, he played with them off to the North Bay Centennials before an incredible professional career of more than 500 games in the National Hockey League. Dave McLlwain, the pride of Seaforth, Ontario, joins us on the pod. It's great to have you here, Dave. Thanks for making time.
My pleasure. My pleasure. We'd be able to talk with you.
A guy from Seaforth, where do you develop your love of hockey? It's got to be some outdoor rinks back in the day.
I was going to say in the backyard, or actually the town rink was actually in my backyard, so I was very fortunate. The family, we were good friends with the arena manager. I mean, in a small town, everyone was friends with everybody, right? So you knew everybody, and I think the love of the game just happened to come. I followed my dad around all the time, went to his games. We'd go to the rink, watch games. I don't know if I was really watching them or playing mini sticks, or I couldn't wait for them to get off and we could run out in the ice and shoot the puck around till they finished the refreshments after their games. Then the longer they stayed in the room, the better for me. So I always enjoyed those times. And whether it was on shoes or skates, I was usually around the rink. I guess labeled the rink rat, I guess.
Do you know you're still listed as one of the 20 most famous people from Huron County, according to the internet?
I actually read the book there, or saw the book that came out a couple of years ago, that I didn't realize how many people have actually come out of Huron County. So that's great. Good to know that. I'll keep that in my back pocket for another
Absolutely. Yeah, whenever you need that one, hey, I'm one of the most 20 famous people in all of Huron County. That's a keeper for sure.
That's right. And then someone's going to go, where the heck's Huron County? So
did you wonder where the heck Kitchener was when you won the role on the team? You weren't drafted into the Ontario Hockey League. How'd you end up with the Rangers?
You know what? It is a long story, and I guess we have a few minutes, so I guess I can tell you it. It was a process, I guess, and I just remember we went to the draft, and Guelph had planned to draft me. They called me. We said, we're going to draft you in the 7th round, or 7th, 8th round. It was going to be a late round. And in Seaforth, we played maybe 5 different towns. One was Wingham, Clinton, Mitchell, local towns that are about our size. But we always, when we got out of our area, we always went north and we played Durham. And there was this guy in Durham called Dave Hopkins. And we were always neck and neck, going back and forth. And he was the pride of his town, I was the pride of my town, and we battled every time. So I go to the draft and we sit there, and it's a Saturday morning. I know we drive all the way down to Mississauga where you sat and you watched, and we sat there for 8 hours. And during that time, there was a 7th round coming, Guelph picks, and I hear that they pick Dave Hopkins. So I think, oh, maybe the 8th round, 9th round. Well, I go through the whole round, sit the whole draft, and didn't get drafted. So as the story goes, I'll speed it up. Monday comes after the draft, and Guelph phones again and says, you know what, Dave, we saw you weren't picked up. We'd still like to invite you to camp. So my dad had some really tough words for them, and he wasn't too happy. He says, you know what, you can go, jump in Lake Huron, because we're not going there. And it happened to be the same day Kitchener called and said, Dave, we saw you weren't drafted. We had your eye on you, but we would still like to invite you to camp. So we were thinking Kitchener, Guelph, obviously would love to go to Kitchener. So as it went on, I was invited to camp, not expecting much. I went down the year before. I think I watched maybe one of the Memorial Cup games before. I think it was 84, and Kitchener lost to Ottawa. Ottawa won it that year.
That's right.
And I was sitting there watching. I'm like, man, I don't know if I can play in this league. These guys are good. It was very intimidating. But you kind of get out on the ice. It's a whole different mindset, I guess. But stepping back a little bit, so I went to. I had planned to go to St. Mary's. I didn't think I would make Kitchener, so I said to St. Mary's that I'll go to Camp Junior B before. And when the time's, I'm going to go to Kitchener, but I will be back. I was thinking eligibility with scholarship at that time. You didn't want to stay too long. So I left St. Mary's, and at the time, I went there, and after 2 days, my dad never talked, and I just kind of had my head, well, I better go back to junior B. I can't play here. So after 2 days, I packed up my stuff and I was kind of walking out. And Tom Barrett was the coach at the time, and we stopped in to talk to him. And he said, "Come on in here for a minute." So we sat in there and we talked to him, and he says, "You know, you have a really good chance of making this team." And so all of a sudden, things kind of changed. Dad and I had a talk, and we decided to not really worry about the scholarship, but I had a chance to play junior B. And so the story went, I ended up not going back to St. Mary's and staying in Kitchener the rest of the time. So it was how it happened, and maybe it was because I wasn't under pressure to play or make it. You just kind of played and went about your business. And there's another funny story to that, as because all of a sudden Stratford, I went for skated with them a little bit the year before. They were the Cultons, of course. Everyone wanted to play there. Well, they found out I was going to make Kitchener. All of a sudden, Dad gets a call from them now and says, we like Dave to come to Stratford. It was a lot of the same situation, same talk as he had with Guelph. So as it turns out, I ended up in Kitchener, and things kind of went from there.
Yeah. And where's Dave Hopkins today?
Dave, I don't think ever played a game in the OHL, never, maybe went to camp. I don't know. I did run into him years later, just kind of, things change as you get older. And it was always a battle with Durham. I still remember those days in Bantam, midget. It was a beating on both ways.
So all of a sudden you're into the Ontario Hockey League, and you're with that team that you mentioned, that Memorial Cup in 84, though they didn't win it, but that was 3 in 4 years the Rangers were in. So you're coming into a really successful team that is just finishing a successful run, and you're in an arena the likes of which you probably didn't see a lot of while you were playing with Seaforth.
No, I didn't. I think maybe once or twice, and when it was actually during the Memorial Cup, I went down there. So yeah, I'm going from a little. Well, I always tell the story. I ended up going from a town of 2,000 to the high school was 2,000 people. So it was a big adjustment. I did travel a little bit for the first month just to see if it was actually going to pan out, and then I had to change schools again, and ended up going to KCI, and they were very good with the hockey players and trying to keep us moving along in our schooling. So it worked out. The family I went to was great. So it was an adjustment. It was a lot of learning that first year. I think a lot of kids, whether you come out of Toronto or whether you come out of a small town, it's a big adjustment into that league, especially coming out of midget double C. And maybe I played a lot of junior D, and which was our level of junior and C4. So I did have the experience of playing against older guys, but maybe not as good. So I think, as I said, you just kind of adjust, and some guys can adjust to it and some guys can, I guess. And like I said, I didn't have a lot of pressure on me to perform as some of the maybe first and second round guys maybe have.
Given the way it started for you, Dave, without being drafted, you weren't even sure you were going to make it. You're still talking to St. Mary's, like, hey, I'll probably be back here in junior B. Was there a moment along the way in that first season in the Ontario Hockey League for you that you thought, okay, I've made it, I belong here?
You know what? I never had that. I had the feeling I think I could play, but it wasn't always an easy road because, your fourth line, you're kind of in and out. I wasn't in and out of the lineup, but I did get sent down to, I think at the time it was, farm team was like Dixie Beehives. It was a tier 2. And I ended up going down for a weekend and played 2 games and had 4 points and kind of come back. And then I stayed the rest of the time. So I didn't really question my talent. I was just like, oh, this is how they're doing it. They want to give me a little more ice time. So I went down, came back, and then just played and tried to learn and watch the older guys. There's some guys there were, first rounders, Wayne Presley and, Garnet McKechnie, these guys that had played and been to the finals and been drafted to the NHL and so on and so forth. So you just kind of sit and kind of mind your own business and try to pick up what you can and try to play your game as well as you could.
What was it like to learn that you had been traded to the North Bay Centennials?
Well, that was then obviously the start of the next year, and things were going pretty good. You get a little more confidence, you start playing a little more, and all I could remember the first year, I was like, oh man, we got to go to North Bay. That's like the longest bus ride ever. So then I get traded. I'm like, oh man, I can't go any farther other than Sudbury and Sault Ste. Marie. So we got told on the Friday, Doug Stromback, John Keller, and myself, and it was a big trade. There were 3 of us going north, and 4 guys came to Kitchener. So Thursday, we got told we had to meet North Bay in Hamilton, and we were going to play with North Bay. We're sitting there, we bring our gear. I remember sitting in the room waiting for the team, the bus. We go there and we play. The next game, we're back in Kitchener against the Rangers. So here you are skating, different room, other side. You're still buddies with the guys. I still stayed at my billet's house that night. So after we go out, we're going to leave Saturday morning. They said, take the night. So we're out with the guys, kind of, we're going to pack up. And so we all come back to my billets. And I remember us phoning Tom Barrett, and we were like, we're not going. We're like, and we hung up the phone. The 3 of us were like, no one wanted to leave, right? We're in Kitchener. It's a great city, great team. And all we could think of going to North Bay. Well, sure enough, we ended up getting in the car Saturday morning and made the trek to North Bay. I had a car, and 3 of us, I don't know how we fit everything in, but we made it up there, and I'd have to say is one of the best things that happened to me.
Yeah, I was going to say, not to jump too far in the timeline, but your final season in the O, 2 years later, after 2 years with the Sens, you lead the team in scoring, and you were second in OHL scoring that season, if I'm not mistaken, with 119 points. I think it worked out all right for you.
Yeah, it sure did. It sure did. Obviously, I had some good guys to play with, and the team was good. And Bert was a hard ass, and discipline. You kind of walk the straight line, and if you went over the wrong side, he let you know it, and you either stayed, or if you went too far, you were gone. He was all business, and I'm not sure if that can work in today's game, some of the things that went on, but he was good for me. He respected me, and I respected him, and I was fortunate. He took me to the World Junior too. So knowing that, then yeah, those bus trips became regular, and you got used to them pretty fast.
How did you pass the time on the bus back then?
Well, I think it was, believe it or not, I tried to keep up with my schoolwork. I always had my parents in the back of my head, and they were, if your marks slip, if you're not doing well in school, then you'll be back home. And so I wasn't a great student, but I did my work and got by, and made sure I attended school, and just you did what you had to do, and yeah, it's kind of part of the discipline, I guess you learn along the way. As much as you don't think of that when you get home at 3:30 and you got to be at school for 8:30, 9 o'clock. It's part of the way back. You don't, like I said, you don't think of it like that, but it's a part of the discipline you learn all the way through hockey.
I'm so glad that North Bay is back in the Ontario Hockey League now after being away for a little while, especially because it allows that North Bay Sudbury rivalry to pick up again. Was that the biggest rivalry for you back then too?
Absolutely. I think I was going up that road to Sudbury like every other week, it felt like. I think we played them. I don't know. I think you played them more, maybe not. It just felt like we were up there so much. And of course, you have that hatred with Sudbury. And I always ask the guys, is that wolf still going across the top of the roof? They're always like, yeah, it's still there. It might be a new one, but it's still going across. So we had some pretty good battles with them. We had good teams too, so we didn't have to listen to that howling of the wolf that much. So
you mentioned a moment ago, Dave, the talented players that you had with you in North Bay, and I'm sure we could go up and down the entire roster, but one guy that certainly stands out is a fellow by the name of Nick Kyprios, who I know after coming back from the pros ended up on your wing.
Yeah. So I mean, we look back at the team. My last year, there was, I think, 8 guys that actually played pro. We had like Darren Turcotte, Nick came back, Billy Holder, I'm missing Mike Hartman, Troy Crowder. Who am I missing? Anyway, I'll think of some of the other guys. Wayne or Tim Bean, guys that played some minors but played pro. But we had a very solid team. Nick came back, and the year before he had 50. I think he had 40 some the next year, and yeah, we connected pretty well in the final year. That's part of it.
That final year, all the way to the OHL championship against the Oshawa Generals, and it goes 7 games for the Gens to knock you out. What do you remember of that final, and obviously the disappointment you must have felt losing in 7?
Well, that was disappointing. The fact that it was the second 7-game series against them, because back then they had this crazy idea. We'll have this super series, which is the top 2 teams in each division will play a series, and whoever wins it hosts the Memorial Cup. So obviously you can't do that today with preparation, and you have to be ready and who's hosting it. And I think it's the only time that they ever had 3 teams, because we played them and they beat us in points, so they had home ice advantage. They win game 7 in that series, so they're automatically hosts and they're in the Memorial Cup. So we both have to go back into the format and play. We have to get back in and get to the finals to win to get in. So we end up back, we'll play Oshawa again, and we lose in game 7, and we're out and they're in, where they should have had both of us in there to make 4 teams. So people talk about that crazy super series, and it was a battle. Like we played them 14 times in a month and a half, basically. Like we knew everyone's family, relatives, grandparents by the end of the season. But it was a beating. It was very disappointing, especially, after the first one. We knew, okay, we could go back in, whether we met them or not. We have another chance to get in, but it didn't work out. So yeah, that was a tough one, especially being in Ontario and get a chance at Memorial Cup, but didn't happen.
You imagine playing a team 14 times in a month and a half these days? Like, that's just wild to think about.
I mean, it might have been 2 months, but it was, and then we had to play the other ones. Windsor, it wasn't an easy round to get back to, because Windsor had a great team. They ended up winning it, I think, the next year. They had a great team, Adam Graves and the Shannon brothers and so on. But yeah, it was definitely ready for a rest at the end of that season.
You mentioned Windsor, and when I talk to guys from this era, playing in that old Windsor arena is always something that brings back a memory or two, because the fans are right on top of you, and it's a tough barn.
It was. I still remember there was like part mesh up top, or somewhere there was mesh, but we do a lot of with the alumni stuff, and you run into guys and Windsor guys, North Bay guys. We always talk about, we all go back. We all live the stories of when and where and how, and it's great to see them, and you forget about it now because we're all the same. We're all retired. There's no hatred or whatever, but we do have some laughs and remember many of those situations.
Well, and back then too, Dave, I mean, you're playing in an era where if there was any bad blood, you found a way to settle it on the ice.
Yes. It was tough go. Obviously I wasn't a fighter, and I knew I wasn't very good at it, so I didn't attempt it. But you did see some fights. In my last year in North Bay, we had a tough team. We had Darren Smith, we had Troy Crowder, we had Mike Hartman, Wayne McPhee, like even Nick fought, Tim Bean. Like there was guys that you knew you were looked after when you're out there, but the other teams had tough guys too that they would settle things pretty quick, and I think that's the respect you gain from some of the other guys, and you were aware of those guys. And even once you got to the NHL, it's kind of, you were aware if you were going to be an idiot, you were going to have to deal with one of these guys that were sitting on the other side of the bench. Maybe not so much in junior, because I had those guys were there. Not that I played like that or looked for trouble, but you were just smarter. I tried to figure it out, even in the NHL, that I was like, okay, you got to respect these guys, because there's a couple guys drooling over there in the bench ready to take your head off if you do something stupid against their team. So, I think it's the respect of the game that maybe is more so back in the day, 20 years ago, that now there's not as much fighting. The tough guys, every player has to be able to play now. And if you can fight, then it's a bonus, but it's very skilled. It's different. And that's a whole other topic.
Yes, it is. Speaking of other topics, you mentioned it when you talked about going to North Bay and playing for a guy like Bert and how good he was for you, including getting you the chance to be at the juniors. And that's another really interesting part of your story, because the World Junior Championship you were at in Czechoslovakia was the so-called punch-up in Piestany, where the lights were turned out because Team Canada, you guys, and the Russians got into a bench clearing brawl. What was it like being part of that?
Well, I look back now, and it was, and we all say it, we run into each other all the time, and it's, if we all had to do it again, we would have. You know, it was what happened, and things happen so fast, and there's a fight going on, and I can say I was right at the edge of the bench when I saw two Russian guys leave their bench, and as soon as that happened, our guys left. And they knew they were going to be outnumbered, and then that's what happened. The five guys on the ice were, I think, that started it were Mike Keane, not started it, were Mike Keane, Theo Fleury, Everett sent a pass with Steve Chason, Kerry Hoffman, and Sean Simpson was in net. So it was craziness. I think a lot of people look at like, how did you see it with the lights out? But when you're on the ice, when the lights went out, I think from the TV, it kind of looked super dark, but we could kind of vaguely see a little bit. It was like you were in a rink when the lights are, you could kind of see, but anyway, that was their way. They didn't know how to stop it. They had two linesmen and a ref. And I just remember them, you see it on the video after, they're down at the end, they just gave up, and we kind of broke it up ourselves, I guess, eventually. And then it kind of dissipated, and then some guys got together, and then all of a sudden it started again. So anyway, it finally got finished off. We go to the dressing room, and some guys were beat up pretty bad. I remember Greg Hoggett's nose was over here because he got head butted, and there was some battles. Ivan Corbo and some guys. The Russians were tough. I wouldn't say they were the best fighters, but they were strong, right? So they were swinging, doing whatever they could. Maybe a little bit dirty that we weren't used to, but we just kind of sat there and we didn't know what was going to happen. Then they eventually come in and said, all right, both teams are disqualified. You're out of the tournament. It was the last game. It's a different format. Obviously, it was a round robin, and we had to win by, I think it was 4 goals or 5 goals, and we were up 5-2 maybe at the time in the middle of the second, and we were dominating, and Russia couldn't win a medal. So it didn't really matter to them. Whether that was their thought process, I don't know. But yeah, I remember we were supposed to go to awards banquet after, and then we were heading to Vienna to fly out in the morning. But it was a direct right out of the country. They brought in the army was there. They had 2 lines of army military taking us to our bus and one to their bus. I remember looking over, their bus was like right here. We're looking over at them. They're looking over at us. Everyone's like, what just happened? And we had an escort right to the border, Austrian border, and then it was right to the airport. And cops turned around, or police, and the bus went right to the airport. We stayed there all night and flew out in the morning. So, and we didn't know what was going on there. I mean, we didn't have social media, texts, phones like nowadays. We didn't know what was going on. We kind of had rumblings. Don Cherry was sticking up for us, and yeah, so people, they were behind us. I think there was a couple that weren't too happy. Obviously, Hockey Canada, but looking back, we're kind of like the black aces of the World Junior. But it's one where there's a bit of a blank page in the encyclopedia of the World Juniors. But it was a fond memory. But yeah, we actually got a nicer gold medal than we would have, I think, from Harold Ballard months later. So I don't know if a lot of people know that, but it was pretty special. They had a ceremony, I think, at Maple Leaf Gardens. A couple guys went. I couldn't go. I remember that. And yeah, I still have it. It's gold medal. My name, number on it. Like it's It's probably better than the one we would have got from the World Juniors. So
I did not know that. And I was going to ask because you talked about the format then and you had to win by 5 goals to win the gold, but at minimum you were guaranteed a bronze. And I wonder if that kind of stuck with you 35 years later, like, damn it, I didn't get my medal, but I did not know Mr. Ballard came through like that.
yeah, he did. It was pretty special. Obviously, I don't think the Russians were his favorite people at the time. And so I think that was one way. I'm pretty sure like we would have had the silver medal if we didn't get the goal advantage. It was a round robin and goals for and against because we kind of bobbled through the tournament a little bit. We lost a couple, won a couple, got big scores, so that helped. And we didn't start the best, but then we picked it up as we went along.
After a really successful final year in junior, off to the National Hockey League you go, a 9th rounder to the Pittsburgh Penguins. And this is just as the Penguins were starting to turn things around with a guy named Mario Lemieux.
Yes. That's so I come out as a 20-year-old, 9th round. I wasn't actually drafted my draft year, which was in Kitchener, and I guess I wasn't really on the radar from NHL scouting. And the next year, I guess they were asking, and Bert was really in my corner telling people, you should draft this guy. And that's how it was the later round. Not that it would have been earlier, but it was not my draft year. So the next year I went one camp, and then the next year stepped in and actually made the team. And played most of the year. I went to the minors a year, and it was another big learning experience. You think junior's tough, you get into the NHL, it's a whole another game, and it's a livelihood, and people are trying to get your job every day. You have to be very prepared, game in, game out. You can't take games off, and it's learning process for younger kids, and the guys were good, and we were, Mario we were all excited my first camp. He was coming back from the Canada Cup '87, where he was always an amazing player, but just kind of came to the next level, I think, out of that, playing with Wayne and winning it. And it's hard to believe he was only 21 or 2 at the time when he did that. And so he come back, and there's excitement. I think we missed the playoffs that year, and the next year we came in and we ended up getting in the playoffs. I was up and down that year, and then the next year I got traded to Winnipeg. But to play with Mario and watch him day in and day out, I had a whole nother respect where I think he took a lot of heat from reporters or people just over the years of, he was lazy, he was this or that, but I didn't see it. He was so talented, especially in that era. Like, you'd see him with 3 guys on his back and still make plays and make goals and score great goals. And sometimes I was on the bench, and it was like I almost wanted to stand up and clap, because it's like, oh, it was like, wow, did he just do that? But you're like, no, that's Mario. Sit down. He's your teammate. So, but he did some things that were just crazy.
Well, I can't help but think too, like, you were pretty well traveled back in the NHL, and 2 different teams, the Islanders and the Penguins, you came back to a second time. And your second stint with Pittsburgh, if I'm not mistaken, had both Lemieux and Yager on the team.
Yeah, we had Ronnie Francis. And how I ended up back there, I was in Ottawa, and I was there year 1 and 2. We had very tough years in Ottawa, and the next year they ended up selling like 7 guys contracts to the IHL back at the time. So they got rid of 7 of us, and these teams somewhat bidded on us to try to take half of our contract to help pay Ottawa off. So Ottawa only had to pay half, and I ended up going to Cleveland. The owner was actually Larry Gordon, who used to be the farm team of Pittsburgh when it was in Muskegon. They moved to Cleveland. So obviously it's still Pittsburgh's farm team. Played well in the minors in the I, and then Pittsburgh decided to, trade back for me at the trade deadline. And I remember my first game, Sundstrom was hurt, and I started on wing with Mario and Ron Francis on right wing. And I was like, okay, so the puck goes back, goes in the corner. Ron gives it to Mario. I'm standing wide open in the front of the net. They pass to me. I score within 7 seconds. And I'm like, okay, this is pretty easy playing with these guys. And ended up scoring 2 that night. And I hadn't played in the league for, most of the year. So, but it was excitement to get back to Pittsburgh. I always had a soft spot for Pittsburgh being my first team. And that year we lost to it was 95 against Florida. That was their first year, and they upset us in Game 7 at home, and then lost to Colorado. I think Colorado handled it pretty well. Not to say we would have beat Colorado, but we had a pretty good team. Ron Francis broke his ankle, so we were missing him, and yeah, just didn't happen. But it was great to go back again.
That was the year, wasn't it? They were throwing all the plastic
It was
rats on the ice. Yeah.
The rat trick. I guess. Yeah, they started with I guess Scott Mellenby during the year shot a rat, ran through the dressing room. It was a really crappy arena and scored 2 goals, and then he hit the rat in the morning. They called it a rat trick, and all of a sudden the rats come out. And yeah, that was part of the playoff. It was insane, actually, every time they scored there.
Just think about your hockey career. You're in North Bay where the Sudbury Wolves have the damn stuffed wolf, and then you're in the show and you've got the Florida Panthers and the rats.
And there's rats coming at you. Yeah, it was. I remember seeing Tom Brasso hiding in the net, so they were coming over as soon as they scored. He knew, and he kind of backed in under the net for protection.
You mentioned the Winnipeg Jets earlier, and obviously that conjures up the name Dale Hawerchuk, who's somebody I know you admired greatly. What was it like with Dale?
Well, there's another guy. I would have to say one of the most, not that he's underrated, maybe what's the word? Maybe not underrated, but unappreciated as a player. But in the hockey world, people knew him, but people that were watching always knew Mario. But he was always behind Gretzky out there. But if you see Dale's numbers, it's just crazy. And watching him practice and realizing how good he was. And he was on that Canada Cup with Mario. And I think he was on the ice when they scored that goal. Very reliable, good defensively. Like maybe not the greatest skater, but he was fast, but just not technically the best skater. But super player, super teammate, even I think better guy off the ice than he was on the ice. Like just all around great person. And it's, tough to see him not around.
You have a rather interesting distinction in the record books, Dave, when it comes to you know where this is going, because it's an interesting distinction for sure. 4 different teams in the same year, 91-92, and to make it even more interesting, you were in every single division in the NHL that year.
Yes, I do get reminded of that very well. A lot of times doing alumni events are introduced as that, but I guess, hey, you're in the record books, and they're not always the records you want, but they remember you for that. And that year was a very interesting year. I definitely had to look at it as everybody wanted me and not somebody didn't want me, because I don't think it could have crushed your confidence. It was very difficult season mentally, and just kind of finding your way around, and teammates, new cities. It was just kind of like your head was everywhere. And I was fortunate enough I played with a lot of great guys, some great organizations. And, I get to Buffalo. I was there literally 2 weeks, and I could tell the stories, but it probably bore people. But it was just, I had the Buffalo one. I could we were walking out for our morning skate, and I see Uwe Krupp coming in, Pat LaFontaine. I'm like, oh, okay, the trade has happened. They were talking about this. I'm almost out, and then John Muckler yells and goes, hey, Mac, just wait in here for a minute. And I'm like, I just got here. I can't be traded. And sure enough, I was gone in the deal with LaFontaine and Benny Hogue, Uwe Krupp, and myself. So I like to say the story was myself or Turgeon for LaFontaine. Sorry, Pat was coming over. Turgeon was going the other way. But I always like to say that it was myself for LaFontaine, and they threw in Turgeon. So that's kind of the way I get around the controversy.
I'm just thinking, though, about you talk about it being a tough year mentally, and I can only imagine with 4 different addresses, all the things you talk about, the teammates, the moving around, etc. Did it ever cross your mind at that point? Because obviously you still had a lot of hockey in you, but did you ever think I'm done with this? Like you feel almost like a piece of
You,
meat, don't you?
you get a little frustrated, and yeah, I was single at the time by myself, so you just kind of find your way, and maybe that's the mental game that made me tougher, or you figure out, and you can maybe go the other way and just say the hell with it. I'm not. The only thing I figured out was that summer I bought a house and moved all my furniture home, and said I'm renting furnished places the rest of my career because my furniture chased me around the whole time that year, and I never, when I left Winnipeg, I was traded on the road, and I never did go back to my apartment, and ended up going to Buffalo. Well, I kept going down the turnpike to Long Island, and found a furnished spot. My furniture sat in storage all year, and I bought a place in Grand Bend and just sent everything home. And the silver lining, I ended up, in Toronto, which is was a great opportunity, and I followed Toronto as a kid, and you get to put on the blue and white, and that was pretty special. And getting back to Winnipeg, I had couple great years there. I was able to find my game and contribute, and I didn't play a lot of power play, but played a lot of shorthanded. And that year, I don't know what happened. I ended up with 7 shorthanded goals, and just you kind of get the confidence back, but it can go just as quick as it shows up when you have confidence. I think a lot of guys can relate to that, how quick you can lose your confidence and how hard it is to get it back sometimes in the game. And that's where the mental part of the game comes in. Yeah, there's a lot of frustrating days when things aren't going well, but I definitely wouldn't change how it went or how my career went for anything.
I'm thinking back on Bert Templeton again, because you said after not being drafted in your draft year to the National Hockey League, he was a guy out there saying, hey, take a look at this guy. You want this guy on your team. And 501 NHL games later, obviously Bert knew a thing or two. What was the secret to you hanging around despite all of this, Dave, and putting in that many games in the National Hockey League?
Well, I don't know. I think, like I said, getting to Kitchener and getting into the junior, and one year I'm a couple years out of junior D and midget double C and C4, I'm on the World Junior. So, and then I started to get some confidence that I was playing a lot, and I actually could score in the OHL. And but I think it might have been, and I look back at, there wasn't a lot of pressure on me because I wasn't drafted and I wasn't a first round. I wasn't expected to go first round to the NHL, or you just kind of played the game, and you build that confidence inside that, it's quiet and just kind of like, all right, I can play, go to the next level. It's definitely harder, faster, but once you get out there and kind of adapt to it, and I think I could always think the game pretty well. So it's just a matter of, and I think attribute to, I could skate fairly well, so that helped getting to the next level, and just everything moved a little quicker and maybe coming under the radar. And yeah, I think everybody has some ups and downs in their career, and you just got to find a way to, how do I get through this? What do I do? Do I just sit and sulk, or do I work harder, or you wait for that opportunity and try not to burn bridges? And yeah, there's many times you're pissed right off and you don't agree with what they're doing, or you think you could play. But I think when you have some good teammates, they bring you along, and they help you, and they're like, keep your confidence up, and keep reiterating why you're here. You can play here, right? Sometimes you start doubting yourself, and that's where that mental part comes in, whether it's mental toughness or just kind of knowing inside that you can do it. Believing in yourself, I guess, is a big part of it. And you always need those other people to believe in you too, but hockey's it's a roller coaster sometimes, and I think it agrees with a lot of people if you talk to them, whether it's a job in the workforce or whatever your employment is, that there's up days and down days, and you just kind of find your way to get through them. And like I said, I wouldn't change it. Nothing's perfect, and you just hammer it out. And yeah, I was very fortunate to get to 501 games. And, it's a lot of guys wish they got one game.
Absolutely true. So that the end of that wacky 91-92 season, when you went from what did it go? You went from the Smythe to the Patrick to the Adams to the Norris with the Leafs. And yes, Ontario boy, small town Ontario boy, playing for the blue and white. The timing couldn't have been much better to get to the Leafs at the end of that 92 season, because 92-93, of course, is etched in people's memories as one of the best in the modern era anyway for the Maple Leafs. That memorable run to the West Final versus Wayne Gretzky and the LA Kings. What was that playoff? I know you weren't in a lot of the games, but you're with the team,
Yeah,
and it had to be crazy.
it was. I think it was just they were so hungry for a winning team after so many years. And it's funny, I do a lot of the alumni events with the older guys that were in the John Brophy time, and just the craziness that was going on with that organization before Cliff come in and kind of put some stability in it. Like just the stuff that went on. And they, Wendell and Gary Lehman, they'll talk about, they had some almost better teams a few years before, but just couldn't get coaching or didn't know the direction. It was just like in shambles all the time. But that year, Kim, I think it was just, you look back now, you're kind of in it. You don't really see it. We knew the city was going crazy and all that stuff. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to be part of it. I think I dressed 4 or 5 of the playoff games. Yeah, you want to be part of it all, but you just wanted to stay hungry. And the guys were good teammates that, kept you part of the team. And when you get a chance, you want to contribute. And even that year was decent. I 13 goals, but in and out of the lineup. But we had a veteran team, and I was one of the younger guys, I think, at 25 at that time. And they made some big trades with some ex-Oiler. Glenn Anderson was there, and Dougie came in, obviously. And I think we got into the playoffs. Like, we didn't get in by a lot, and we ended up upset in Detroit. So we were fortunate enough to get by there. And I think Pittsburgh got upset too, and it was kind of wide open. St. Louis, every series went game 7. I think we maybe ran out a bit of gas in game 7 with LA, but not talking the infamous game 6 in LA that, yes, Wayne high stuck Dougie, should have been out, comes back. I mean, yeah, those are memories, and it's part of the game. You can't turn the clock back. And I think the biggest fact, like I listened to Doug talk about it, which I kind of forgot, that after game 6, one of the reporters, I can't remember, said something about Wayne. They won, but wasn't his best series, or hasn't been playing the best. That was probably the worst thing they should have said, because all of a sudden Wayne comes out, scores 3 goals, and tells him it was probably one of the best games he ever played in his career. So people forget about that, even though we probably would have been nice to win in game 6 down there. But there's so many factors that you can look at. And yeah, the high stick was one of them, but that's water under the bridge now. But I know people do talk about it for so long. I think it's time that the record was changed, and hopefully they can change it this year.
Well, speaking as a Leafs fan, yeah, that's a tough one for me to forget. And you're pretty matter of fact about it. Yes, Wayne Gretzky did high stick Doug Gilmour. There's no question about that. And for whatever reason, Kerry Fraser just decided to not call it.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, back then we had one ref, right? The 2 linesmen, they'll still show highlights. They're all sitting there trying to talk. And are they sitting there going, well, it's Wayne Gretzky, this could, who knows? Only they know. And like nowadays, you get the video replay. It's easy to say now would be different, but that was then and this is now. So that's the way it was handled. Unfortunately, it didn't come out in our favor.
You mentioned that, Lehman, Clark, there might have been some even more talented Leafs teams prior to this one that you were a part of that had that memorable playoff run, but maybe one of the things holding them back was coaching. And Pat Burns certainly got a lot out of you guys. What was he like as a coach? Any similarities between him and Bert Templeton?
Very much. Well, if you look back, Pat was actually the assistant coach with Bert at the World Junior. So I I knew him a little bit. Yeah, he was hard. He had the foot on the gas all year. He made us work. Looking back, maybe he should have a couple of days off for some of these guys. Might have been a little better, but that was his coaching style. Maybe that's how he would kind of do 3 years, 3 years, three guys. It gets hard on you and burned out, and there's got to be some downtime here and there. But it wasn't with Pat, and he got the best out of what we had. Very disciplined coach on the players. Yeah, he was tough on us. There was guys like any team. The Dougie obviously had a little longer leash than some of us, and I think he respected some of the older guys. And I was somewhat younger and still learning the game, I guess you could say. But yeah, people look back and he was the reason. We had a good veteran team in the room, which I think really helped also. We had Felix Potvin that came in as a rookie and kind of maybe didn't know what was going on, just stopped the puck without knowing what the pressure of playing in Toronto. And yeah, there's just a lot of things that came together that year as a team. And obviously the coaching staff was part of it too.
Do you recall a practice away from the Gardens where you guys had to bus to it and the bus ended up leaving without Pat Burns and the rest of the coaches?
I do remember that. We were all kind of nervous and took the city bus dress. I think we were going over the varsity arena at the university. And I remember Dave Ellett he's like, let's go. Everyone's like, hey, you're not on the bus. Too bad. Let's go. Like they would leave on us. So we left, and all of a sudden they show up in a taxi, him and the three coaches or two other coaches, Mike Murphy and I'll think of it. I can see his face. Anyway, they show up and we're skating around. All of a sudden, he blows the whistle and he says, get in the corner here. And he was pissed off and he's mad. We don't know. Mike Kitchen's the other coach. And we're in the corner and we're all like, oh, we're in shit here. What's going to happen here? And he's like, who the hell told the bus to go? Dave Ellett said, well, I did. He says, well, good for you. Just don't be effing late, any of you guys, for anything, because I'm going. So he kind of laughed and away we went, but it was kind of he knew he was late and he was happy that someone took charge. So it was funny. It was kind of funny them showing up in the taxi more than anything.
I remember from that playoff run too, Dave, where in the first game against LA, when McSorley clocked Gilmore and then Clark and McSorley, but I'll tell you what, I'm still surprised really that Melrose and Burns didn't get at Melrose there. He was pretty animated back behind that bench, wasn't he?
Yeah, I remember that too. I wasn't dressed that game, but I remember seeing I was kind of down in the hallway a little bit, and you kind of come halfway, and the doctors sit there, and there's some security guards, but I think they were ladies at the time, maybe. But anyway, everyone held them back. They didn't get over. It would have been kind of funny to see that and add a little more excitement. Because you can walk right past, like right to the other box, and there's actually maybe 7 or 8 seats that were right between the benches, which was kind of funny to have. But yeah, people got a front row seat to a lot of language and a lot of action right there.
Mentioned earlier that there were the two teams that you returned to, both the Islanders and the Penguins, another short cup of coffee before your NHL career was done. How did you know it was time to hang them up in the NHL and try out your luck in Europe?
Well, I mean, you don't know. You want to keep playing, and I had a great opportunity to go over to Europe. And my agent was always, I think you'd be a great player over there. You're a great skater, and he asked me a couple of times. I'm like, no, I'm not ready yet. I want to go, and I don't think you're ever ready. You always have that dream still going on, and so I did go over. I played in a small town called Landshut, Germany. A lot of North Americans came over that year. It opened up, and it felt like we were back in the NHL. We had a lot of guys. Dean Evison, who's coaching in Minnesota, Mike Bullard, Gino Cavallini, Mark Lamb. We had a list of great players, and the city was kind of small. I played okay, but it wasn't. My heart was not. I love it here because you always think, well, maybe I could go back, or maybe I could go. And I liked the IHL at the time. Guys were making really good money. So I was but then I ended up getting a good contract in Bern, Switzerland the next year. I played that year, and then actually Ottawa said, we'd like you to come back and join our IHL team in Detroit. And then if we need you for the playoffs, we'll bring you up. And I still wanted to play. It was only end of February. But anyway, I still had a contract and we couldn't get it worked out. And it ended up not coming back. But yeah, and so that year I enjoyed it a little more. You're in the right situation, the right city, and 2 years in Bern. And I kind of had in my mind, I'm going to play over here. So you gotta immerse yourself in the culture, the language. It's not North American hockey. It's good hockey, but you just have to adapt to it a little better. And then I ended up in Cologne for 9 years, and it was basically like my second home after a while. And decided, I was kind of ignorant about learning the language at the start because I'm like, I'm not going to be here very long. I'm going to be here a year or two. I ended up 12 years there, and finally after year 5, I think I went to school and tried to learn some German. 5 of us went and tried to get some basic stuff down, and some of it stuck with me, some of it didn't. I wasn't the best, but it definitely helped. I should have did that the first year. And I think a lot of, as fans in the German league, they just want you to try and kind of speak it. Some guys were really good at speaking it, but a lot of them spoke English in the dressing room. The young kids, everyone spoke English. So yeah, I enjoyed my time once I kind of made up my mind that that's where I'm going to continue to play. And fortunate to play till I was 42.
What's the hockey like?
I would compare it to like a good American League team because there was a lot of good players that come over. If you lose sight of a guy over here, you can look over there and they're probably over in Europe. And that was before the KHL had started. It kind of opened up when I was 35, 36, and I just didn't see myself leaving a good situation and go to Russia and maybe work out, maybe not. And money isn't everything, and you want to be happy. And I was comfortable there, and that's a big part when you're in Europe. If you go for 6, 7 months, make it for some good money and get out of there, I guess you could do that. But I didn't try, and the only, I get kind of off track there, but the hockey was it's good. I just would think at my time the refereeing was a little behind, and that part of it got frustrating. And now you see how well different the games changed. Like the hooking and holding was bad here. It was even worse over there. And it got frustrating. Yeah, the bigger rink, but I find that doesn't really speed up the game. It kind of slows it down because people kind of stay on the outside, where I enjoy the game in the North American game much better.
It looks like you still keep very connected and you're out there doing alumni events whenever you can.
I do. I get started after a year, and you kind of try to find your way around different things and find your comfort zone. And we do a lot of stuff, and you do get to see a lot of the guys. We're in Kitchener. We do some of the Hockey Helps the Homeless, Easter Seals, the different events that are through Ontario. And Easter Seals become a big part. I've done a lot of them with Jackson Events, and you get to know some of the kids, and just you know where the money's going, and it's a very good cause. And we get to play the game. We're still playing hockey and raising money for different things. And we have the Leaf alumni games. We've got NHL alumni games, so you can be as active as you want. And I still like to play. I have a couple skates that I do with guys that are just for fun. So I still enjoy the game, and yeah, it keeps us busy after, that's for sure.
I know you're back in the Huron County, Lake Huron area, and I wonder, do you ever stop to just think back on this and the kid from Seaforth and what hockey has brought you in life?
I do. It was funny. I was thinking of that the other day, and just traveling around, and the people you meet. You can go somewhere, and you usually run into somewhere or some guy. You look like a player, and once you retire, I've learned that now doing all the alumni stuff. We're all in the same boat. Whether you were the first team All-Star or you were the fourth line, we're all the same. We're all the same now. We're in the same boat. we're retired, enjoying life, and trying to give back. And I feel very fortunate to see a lot of the world. I've been in many countries and met many guys. Obviously, playing in 4 teams in 1 year, I got to know a lot of new guys. I remember that summer after that, there was a golf tournament in Toronto, and it was on 2 courses. It was Lionhead or something. There was like 34 guys, and I counted. I played with 32 of them. And that random. There was guys from Winnipeg that live in Toronto. Buffalo guys come up, and so many guys around the Toronto area. And it was just kind of like, okay, I got to know a lot of guys. Now it's like we run into each other, and it's kind of like, where did I play with you again? Was it Long Island, or was it Buffalo, or was it Toronto? Because some guys played in both, and you get to know them. It's like you should, but it's like it becomes such a fog sometimes where you were and who you're with. But yeah, I like I said before, I wouldn't change anything. A lot of great times, great memories, and yeah, very, very fortunate.
How do you think those guys would describe Dave McLlwain as a teammate?
I would like to be known as a good teammate. Whether things are going good, whether they're going bad, I was always I was there. It's hard not to get down when you're not playing and be that mopey guy around the room, but you just kind of got to figure that out yourself, because that type of attitude in rooms or teams can be hard on it wears on guys. So it's kind of any young guys or guys I meet, it's just you got to learn to be a good teammate, and you're not going to agree on everything. And I guess you want to have the respect of your teammates for how you play and what you can bring to the team. And most of the guys on the teams have gone through what you've gone through. If you were in another lineup or maybe didn't play regular sometime in their career. So most guys get that. Not every guy that's happened to, but I would say, I don't know what kind of percentage, but I'm sure 75% of guys that have gone through that, or you see guys get sat out now, it happens all the time. And it's a bit of a, eat that bit of humble pie and kind of figure out, what attitude do I go with here? Either I'm in or I'm out, and you just want to be that good teammate when you get a chance to get in there, just hopefully be able to contribute and bring what you can to the table, and obviously help the team out.
This is going to get really interesting, Dave, because we're recording this the night before the Leafs open the 2023 playoffs against Tampa Bay. It takes me a couple of weeks to get it posted, but you mentioned earlier that maybe this year's Leafs team can rewrite a new chapter. So by the time this comes out, you're either going to be a genius or we're going to be laughing at you a little bit. But come on, let's talk about what are the chances here? I'm
a believer, as everybody says, and sooner or later the cards have to change. And I just think this year they've added some great depth. Obviously Ryan O'Reilly's a C4 there, Huron County boy, and you know what he brings to the table. But Achari, they just added some bottom six. Not that Ryan is, but he can play anywhere up and down. A lot of those guys can play anywhere up and down the lineup. They had some grit on the third and fourth line that I think, and some scoring. And I like what they did in defense. McCabe and Luke Schen's very solid back there. I was very surprised when he handled Patrick Maroon there in the fight, which they need that. They need that toughness. He might not be as fleet of foot as he used to be, or any of the other guys, but he's got the most hits in the league. You can't be a bad player if you're doing that. And he's won the cup. They have a lot of experience, I think. I think a lot of the guys, we talk about this all the time, and it's a few bounces here and there, a bit of luck. Like you look back last year, game 6 in Tampa, I think they should have won that game. And they didn't. They come home game 7. As we know, anything can happen on home ice. And Tampa, you're hoping maybe, are they getting tired? It's 4th year, 3 years they've been in the finals, 2 they won. They're still a very solid team. And I don't think anyone's taken anyone lightly, especially with the Leafs that haven't been by a first round. But I just think they're a year older, year more experience, maturity. Maybe Matthews didn't have 60 goals, but maybe he'll have a great playoff. And last year I think he he exerted a lot of energy going for that. Maybe saved a little bit. Maybe, Marner's been consistent all along. Different guys step up, and obviously we all know it's going to come down to goaltending too. And Samsonov's carried a lot of the load this year, and I think he's the guys believe in him, and you have to believe in your goaltender for a big part of it and make that save. And there's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts, and luck and bounces that can hopefully go their way this year.
I think O'Reilly was 9th on that list of famous Huron County natives, and you were 18th. So you're both in there. You're both in. He's just a little ahead of you. Dave.
The Conn Smythe or the Stanley Cup or something that got him ahead of me there.
Well, we'll find out how prophetic this turns out to be when we do get it posted. But this has been a lot of fun sitting down with you. Thanks very much for making the time to join the podcast.
My pleasure. It's always an enjoyable time talking hockey, going down memory lane.